So what I'd like to do now is to get on to introduce Anna Speers. Anna is the CEO of AuctionsPlus. You really enjoy her preso this morning. I got to know Anna, it'll be 10, 15 years ago actually. And she's super effervescent, if that's right, super passionate about what she does. She's been the CEO at AuctionsPlus for 4 years. She's now becoming the COO of the AA company, and her task there is to transform their whole supply chain to produce luxury beef and supply that around the world to, the top restaurants in the biggest cities, and to really drive the integration from production to consumption in that area. So. But has driven a lot of innovation that we'll hear about on AuctionsPlus this morning, both up till now and new things that are on the horizon. But she really grew up, getting her fingers dirty. She calls it the McLeod's daughter moment, where she worked in the stock camps with a consolidated pastoral company for what was going to be 6 months and became 6 years. So she sort of worked her way up, and I suppose part of the brief today is to really talk about this world of ag tech and stuff that's coming and broader than just AuctionsPlus. So Anna Speer, thanks very much for joining us, and let's have a great first up preso. Thank you.
Thank you. So, good morning everyone. Can you hear me all right? Wonderful. Absolute pleasure to be here. I would say that I am a little bit effervescent, bubbly, to say the least. Jason's mandate, when Jason asked me whether I'd come and speak today, he asked me to be challenging, to be controversial, to give you a little bit of a fright on some of the things that are out there. So what I have tried to do is include some of the really cool emerging tech opportunities that are out there, and hopefully we'll go through a bit of a change experience together. This slide that I've got up here for you at the moment, I have mixed emotions today because this is actually the last presentation I get to do for AuctionsPlus. And so I'm a little bit sad, so you'll see that come through. And I'm also a little bit excited, and I'm also scared shitless about the opportunity that I have coming forward for me that I start on the 6th of August. So there is a reason that I point that out. But for me, I think, it's important to trust in the magic of new beginnings. And the reason I put this picture up there was, and the guys in the office thought it was a bit of a weird picture to put up, water on the road disappearing down the drains in Sydney would make some people a bit cross. But for me, it's a picture of reflection. The rain does wash things away. It does provide new beginnings. And we need more of it in a lot of places. So that was why I thought I'd put that picture up there. So today I'm going to go through a few different things. We're going to talk about change because I think it's really important. With that will be a little bit about feelings, which I know you guys all love talking about. We're going to talk about emerging technology, online marketplaces, AuctionsPlus, and the future, if we're brave enough. Jason also said last night that I was going to tell you a little bit about myself. I wasn't. I had no intentions of doing that. So I thought I'd put a quick slide up there to tell you that I'm an explorer. I'm very curious. You can see Dad and I climbing some mountains in Nepal. I like maps. You can see me there going through a river there with a mate, but I do like to get off them sometimes. And sometimes it does put you in sticky situations like where we were there. I think laughter is critical. I have a very large dog named George, who is the most important person in my house, and then the husband. And then I'm very thankful for the 4 people down in the bottom right-hand corner there, my grandfather and grandmother and my parents, who allowed me to embrace technology and agriculture. I was a city slicker. I classify myself as a sort of country kid now. But they really did open my eyes to the opportunity to the Australian agricultural industry, which is now something that I'm very, very passionate about. So, change. How do you react to change? And I want you to think about this as I go through my presentation. Are you an ostrich? Do you stick your head in the sand and pretend it's going to go away? I know a few farmers that do that. You just ignore it, it'll disappear. Are you a boxer? So do you fight it with legislation and regulation? And we're going to talk a little bit about clean meat or bioengineered meat or plant-based meat. Should they be allowed to put it on the supermarket's shelves? Should we treat it a bit like Uber was treated by the taxi industry and say that's illegal? Or should we get a little bit smarter and understand why people want to use that product? Or are you a pioneer, that when you're confronted with something new, you take a curious look at it and you go, wow, how could this work for me? And as we go through this presentation, I want you to think about your reactions, because I'm going to show you some things that are pretty confrontational. And think about how you respond to them. Because by the end of this presentation, I want you to think that you want to shift into that curious mentality when you're confronted with new things, because I think that's where the magic begins. So, emerging technology. We're going to whiz through some of this. This is some of the cool stuff that I've seen out there, and some of the cool things that are coming. So vertical farms, bringing the bush back to the cities. These guys are growing mini lettuce heads in New York City in shipping containers. They produce 50,000 mini lettuce heads a year. Autonomous cars. The prediction is that there will be places in the world by 2025 where it will be illegal for people to drive on the roads. They're predicting that the kids born today, will not get a driver's license in the same way that we have done historically. Augmented reality. They're also predicting that by 2025, we're not going to be using our smartphones anymore. How does that make you feel? That we're going to be using glasses, and this will be the way that we integrate with life. There's also people out there at the moment doing work around wearables, where you connect your brain to the internet. You don't need to Google it anymore, you just think it. How do you feel about that? If you go back to the 70s, we had IBM Watson, where he won Jeopardy. IBM Watson is now curing cancer, writing new music, creating film clips. This artificial intelligence is just growing. In Dubai, they're predicting that the police force will be made up of robots. 25% of the police force will be made up of robots by 2030. And last year, they inducted their first artificially intelligent citizen. Pretty crazy, hey? Everyone's going quiet. That's usually when I know that everyone's feeling in that uncomfortable space. We're seeing companies looking at supply chain transformation. So this one's a bit closer to home, looking at bringing abattoirs to the farm to produce a more premium product with lower stress, and ideally, looking at ways in which we can change the supply chain. When I first saw this, hands up who thinks this is going to work. There's 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, there's a couple, few. I'd say 90% think not a chance. When I first looked at it, I thought, not a chance, that's ridiculous. There's so many challenges around that. If you go and look at the shipping industry and look at the fishing trawlers, those giant fishing trawlers are now 80% factory. They've taken the factory to the oceans. So who's to say that maybe we don't find a way to take the abattoirs to the farms? It's growing in France, it's growing in Switzerland. Who's to say that we don't have like a Star Wars type ship that comes in and just sucks those cattle and sheep up at some stage? This one is really uncomfortable. So behaviour transformation. There are countries looking at how they can transform behaviour. So China, 2 years ago, started a voluntary trust rating program where they started tracking their population based on trust. So they looked at who you were friends with on social media, how much time you spent online, how creditworthy you are, how you interact with people around you, what phone calls you make, what bills you pay, what bills you don't pay. It's going to be mandatory by 2020. In this period of time, they've actually, well, let me go back. People with low trust ratings will be told where they can send their kids to school, what sort of jobs that they can have. It will reduce their internet speed, and it will manage their behaviour. Everyone sort of went, oh, this is a bit crazy. Surely not. They've actually banned 1.5 million people from using public transport from being deemed not trustworthy enough. So by 2020, China is saying this will be across their entire population. Some pretty scary stuff there. Food transformation. And this is the one that I like you to think about how it makes you feel. Clean meat. So clean meat, not plant-based protein meat, clean meat, bioengineered, grown in a test tube. No animals have to die. 5 years ago, it would cost about $350,000 to produce a kilo of it. It's now $90 to produce a kilo of it. Apparently it tastes and bleeds just like meat. How do we feel about it? Would you eat it? Who are the people investing in it? Tyson Foods, the largest food company in the world. Cargill, a large meat processing facility, because to be able to do this, it removes the costs that they've had to pay for processing. How do we feel about it? Are we curious about it, or are we angry? Do we want to fight it with legislation? Do we want to say it shouldn't be allowed to be on the shelves in the supermarkets? And Jason mentioned the plant-based mince that's in the supermarkets at the moment. I live in Newtown in Sydney, inner west. It is the most green, hipster part of Sydney ever. I tell people I run a business that's about connecting cows and sheep on the internet to give them better transport and feel good, because it's seriously green. I don't talk about live export, I don't talk about processing, because every second person is vegan. How do we feel about this? And my challenge to you is, I think we need to think about how we respond to these things. I added an additional one in here because sometimes that's how we feel when we see these new transformations. But I believe we actually have to get curious about why people want to buy that plant-based protein off the shelves in the supermarket. And it's been selling out at $20 a kilo, as opposed to your mince for $9.99. We need to get better at understanding why people want that product, and we need to be able to sell the benefits of our red meat product. I can tell you every second person in Newtown can tell me 100 reasons why you should eat the plant-based mince and 100 reasons why you shouldn't eat the real meat. I probably struggle to give you 5 reasons why we should eat red meat. And I'm in that industry. So I think that's something that we all need to get much better at, and we need to be teaching people about our product. So how are we feeling now? It's supposed to be fun. So I'm here to tell you it's not going to go away. So if you behave like an ostrich and you stick your head in the sand, it ain't going anywhere. So you might as well either get angry about it or get curious about it. And I'd argue for the curious. Life is only going to get more and more online. These are some of my favourite online marketplaces, and we're going to whiz through them quickly, because Angus will probably be flagging me to say that I need to hurry up along the way. Airbnb, established in 2007. This is one of the best businesses, I think, out there. Hands up who's used Airbnb. Cool, great, quite a few people. 3 blokes ran out of money, needed to get some money to pay their rent, so they thought, let's rent out the floor space in our San Francisco home with some air mattresses, charge $70 a night, and we'll give them breakfast and good conversation the next morning. So essentially the business model was, take photos of the most private parts of your house, stick them up on the internet, and let strangers come and stay in your house. Pretty good idea? They exploded. And now they have over 4 million rooms in 65,000 cities across 161 countries. They're valued at $30 billion, and they surpassed the Hilton 2 years ago, which is currently valued at $25 billion. So they surpassed an organisation that had been around for over 100 years in the space of 5 years. Uber. Tap the app, get a ride. Launched in 2010, now valued at $69 billion. Over 50% of the rides in the US now are via Uber. They've disrupted an industry that's over 100 years old. In Sydney now you can get Uber Eats, Uber Pets. They bring puppies to the office for 15 minutes of cuddle time. Uber Chopper and Uber Boat. I'm serious, they actually do. Amazon initially started to be the world's largest bookshop in 1995. Now everything is accessible. These guys are taking over supply chains globally. They're valued at over $300 billion, and the people that are scared of these guys are your Coles and your Woolies, because these guys are seriously disrupting the world. And then AuctionsPlus, Australia's livestock marketplace. one of the older ones actually, established in 1986. We have 52,000 unique users and facilitate the sale of about $830 million worth of livestock annually. All of these platforms have something in common. Usually I'd ask what this is, but I'm not going to in the essence of time. They're creating trust, often between strangers, that results in a physical transaction. Do you guys want to have a go at what this feels like? So you've got to say yes. 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 Okay. Fabulous. So I want you to all take out your mobile phone, your smartphone. You've got to keep moving. Hold it up and unlock it, obviously, for those that have it locked. Quite often in this industry, though, most people are very trusting. They don't lock their mobile phones. Hold it up in your left hand. Everyone holding it up in your left hand. Come on, boys. No smartphone? I don't believe you. So hold it up in your hand. And I want you to hand it to the person on your left. So you now have 30 seconds to do whatever you like with that phone. Okay, hand the phones back. So a couple of observations for you. A few people froze. This gentleman over here stuck the phone back in his pocket. And you all started laughing. It wasn't because you thought it was funny, was it? It was because you were really nervous. You were handing something over to someone that was really, really important to you. You were trusting them to look after something that is responsible, that is effectively a lot of your personal information. And vice versa. This other gentleman over here held onto the other person's phone sort of out here at arm's length, a bit like you didn't know what you wanted to do with it. You felt responsible. That's the sort of feeling that online marketplaces are trying to drive. And that's the way that we should be operating as an industry, looking after each other, looking after our supply chains, and building trust across the entire supply chain. So, AuctionsPlus, which is what I'm here to talk to you about. Let me tell you a little bit about the AuctionsPlus journey. Established in 1986. That's me on the left. I was 4 years old, helping, possibly hindering my grandfather in the shearing shed. But AuctionsPlus was historically known as CALM, Computer-Aided Livestock Marketing. The thing I think that is pretty amazing is that this business, an online marketplace that now is the largest livestock marketplace in Australia, was established before the internet, before on-farm computers, before mobile phones, I think in the year that the CB radio was actually introduced on farm. So these guys were visionaries. They were looking so far forward about the opportunities that electronic trading could provide and looking at transforming the supply chain before the technology was even there. And these guys were farmers. So when people tell you that farmers aren't innovative, I'd beg to differ. They were well before eBay. And they were doing some pretty amazing things. You could calm yourself with a Tandy computer, which was about the size of me. And I think it's important to look back on this because farmers are really innovative, provided it fixes a problem or solves a problem. How does it work? Hands up who doesn't know how AuctionsPlus works. A couple of people? Wonderful. So I'll whiz through this, and Angus Street, I should have welcomed him here before, is sitting up the front here. He's here for you to ask lots of questions for as well. He's also come along for the ride because I am leaving the organisation on the 16th. So Angus is your key person that's going to drive our values moving forward. So how does it work? We have accredited assessors. They tend to be predominantly livestock agents, but there are some non-agent assessors out there as well. They come on farm. They measure your livestock, so they look at breed, dentition, weight range, feed. They collect all of this information. They put it up on the internet. It's then available for everyone to see. On average, most sales have about 500 buyers in them. We have a weekly cattle sale on a Friday and a Tuesday and a Thursday sheep sale. The catalogue then gets released and distributed to everyone around Australia. The online commercial auctions happen, everyone logs in, they bid away, and the livestock go directly from your farm to the buyer's property at the cost of the buyer. They also have the protection of your reserve because you set the price, and Bob's your uncle. The other things that we also do is interface sales. So for stud sales, we bring online buyers to your physical sale, and we look at other things as well. We'll sell pretty much anything. If you want to sell dogs, we can sell dogs. We sold some car parks in Sydney the other day. But our core focus is actually livestock, and we believe really strongly in focusing on our core products because that's what makes us good at what we do. Why does it work? There's heaps of reasons. Number one, I think, for me, it is the easiest value proposition to sell. The stock remain on farm until they're sold and they go direct to the buyer. You're cutting out that additional logistical piece and you're using the auction system to determine true market value. Breaks down barriers. We sell cattle and sheep all over Australia. It's not unusual to see them go from Albury Wodonga down to Kangaroo Island, from the western states across to the east. It's cheaper. You do still have to pay an agency commission, and people often ask me, why don't I get rid of agents? Because they're the guys that are making sure it works on the ground. If we don't have an independent person assessing your stock, the buyers won't bid, but they also deal with any misdescription issues that we have. It's convenient. There's less volatility and control. If the market tanks, your stock aren't going to go for less than the reserve. You can negotiate with the highest passing bidder. And we do believe that the animals perform better going direct to the buyer rather than going through alternative routes. From a biosecurity perspective, I think we're awesome, but we're still working through some of the challenges that our industry have. Foot rot is one in particular. It's something that we take a very vested interest in, and I'm sure there'll be people that will catch us at some stage to tell us some of the experiences that they've had. We do try to lead with best practice. Sometimes that best practice isn't there, and so we do have to wing it a little bit, but we do like to hear about it. So we're a very responsive team. But yes, most importantly, it establishes a market floor, because without having the auction system, whether it's the physical, the online, you don't know what your product is worth. So the future for AuctionsPlus. I thought I'd put this one up because I think it's well, I love the picture, but I think it's really important. So this really smart guy who's a Harvard professor said, institutions will try to preserve the problem to which they are the solution. What this is referring to is how we often try to innovate or improve without thinking outside of the box. AuctionsPlus is a really good example of a transformation. They've taken a piece of the supply chain out. And I think often with linear thinking, all we do is automate. We get more efficient. And I'm not throwing sale yards under a bus when I say this, but it's a good example of you're seeing the innovation there being linear. We've got automatic weighing. We're getting people out of the yards. We're looking at soft floors, big roofs. We're just making it better. From an AuctionsPlus perspective, what we look at now is what could disrupt us. How do we transform AuctionsPlus? Because there's challenges. We don't have as good a relationship between the farmer and the buyer, because the auction system does disrupt that. It's a win-lose situation. So things that we're looking at now is how do we transform that? How do we bring the benefits that you get when you sell direct, that relationship piece, that feedback piece, how do we bring that to the table, but also have the auction piece as well to determine price? And we're not sure what that looks like, but to me, that transformational thinking is what our industry needs to be doing, not just getting a little bit better. Very quiet crowd. Some of the other things that we're doing, AuctionsPlus wool. So hands up who knows wool trade? Couple of people, not that many. Okay, wool trade's been around for, Rob, 10 years, 12 years. It's a bid and offer board. It's selling wool electronically online. It's a pretty ordinary old platform. We've just rebuilt that, and it's now being released on the 31st of July, an opportunity to sell your wool electronically online. The reason that we rebuilt it and brought it into the AuctionsPlus brand is because you can then use all of the cool features we have in the livestock space in the wool space. So currently we've got, on wool trade, Western Australia is the most active state. They sell about 5,000 bales a year, or they did in the 16-17 season, followed by Victoria and then New South Wales. And currently we sell about we sell 1,039 different grower brands on the Wool Trade platform. So we're replacing it. It is in beta testing. If people are interested, tell Angus and he can give you access to it. And essentially, the idea was to bring a bit of innovation into that space. Phase 2, which will happen a couple of months after that, is the make an offer functionality. So to be able to, people to make an offer on your wool and vice versa. It still goes through the same process that it currently does, which is a really interesting challenge. Happy to talk about that as well. Because it's one of the few things, it's actually not more cost effective. The livestock get to stay on your farm, so I can wipe out the cost of freight and the yard fees. The wool still has to get tested. So it is an interesting space. It's something we're looking at, and we're working with a number of the brokers and the exporters to look at what we could be doing to innovate in that space. Also happy to hear people's ideas. Some of the other things that we're doing, we're becoming data-driven, both internally and externally. So now on AuctionsPlus, when you log on, you've got a dashboard. It'll tell you the history of the stock you've purchased. It'll also tell you the history of any of the stock you've sold. We're looking at how we put data back into the hands of our customers to help you make better decisions. We're big believers in data. We also do believe, though, it needs to be used ethically. And that's one of the things around trust. If you're giving us your data, you need to be comfortable with what we're going to do with it. You don't want us doing what China's doing to their customers, to their citizens. The other things that we're looking at is feature lamb sales. We've been doing them for a couple of years now. Our industry, we're pretty innovative. We like to jump in and get into things really quickly, don't we? Yeah? AuctionsPlus has been around for 32 years. It's grown exponentially in the last 4 years. Took 20 years to make a profit. You guys got on board pretty quickly there. So store lamb sales, we started these when I started at AuctionsPlus. Angus has kindly put the last two financial years up there for me. But essentially we thought statistics show you that the bigger volume you have of the same commodity, the more likely you are to be able to establish true market value or a floor. And what that means is you can establish a premium. So more means more money. And so you see the bigger selling facilities like Wagga tend to drive a premium on your stock. So we started doing that with lambs. In FY17, we had 380,000 head. FY18, we had nearly 1 million head of lambs. People are getting on board and it's growing. And you can see here the number of vendors joining up has more than doubled from 544 to 1,200. Number of assessors, 235 to 366. It's growing. And so I think that's really exciting. And that's a space that we're going to continue to work on. And we're starting to do that with prime lambs a little bit as well. Slowly though. Slowly, because we don't want to move too fast in our industry. But it is exciting to start to see what are the barriers that are stopping us from doing these things. I'm nearly there. Sorry, Jace. And then moving forward for AuctionsPlus, the biggest thing that we're focusing on is how do we continue to drive trust and accountability in our industry? How do we continue to lead? How do we identify best practice? And currently we're using that through rating systems. We're also passionate about building ecosystems and looking at how we can partner with and work with other people in the industry to build a supply chain or a value chain that works for everyone. So I invite you to have a think about how you'll respond to change in the future. Where do you want to be? And certainly, from my perspective, when I have that feeling of running away, like I do a little bit about the AACO job, is the opportunity to shift and to get curious about it rather than be reactionary and stick it in a bucket and ignore it or fight it. And as Charles Darwin once said, who's a smarter man than me, it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one that's most adaptable to change, and there is so much change coming. It's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So the future of our industry, it's up to us. What are you going to do about it? Thank you very much for your time. How did I go? Did I hit the 30-minute mark? Angus, do you want to come up here so that everyone can meet Angus as well?
So when you didn't get any response, my sentiment was they were quite engaged, so I wouldn't stress too much about that. Now, we have a few roaming mics and we have a chance to take some questions, so that would be great. We've got one right down in the front row from our keynote speaker coming up.
One, two, there we go. And you mentioned Uber. Any scope for something like Uber trucks, like backloads and, get on your phone, there's an empty truck going from Hay to Mildura?
So I probably forgot to tell you something. For those that don't know, AuctionsPlus is owned by Elders, Landmark and Ruralco. So the three largest pastoral companies, agency companies in Australia. They bought it in 1996 to sit on it or squash it because they saw it as a competitive threat. This is my opinion. I'm leaving so I can say it.
Footfall, yeah.
And so one of the challenges those organisations have had is how fast do you let the business run, because the ultimate endpoint disrupts their traditional revenue streams. We have been throwing around the idea of Uber Livestock, and I think it's a brilliant idea because currently freight companies in Australia run at about 60% capacity. I think it's the same in New Zealand. Someone should definitely do it. I think AuctionsPlus is definitely in the position to do it. They're not that keen to do it just yet. We have been talking to Frasers about doing it and also looking at how we integrate best practice with transport there as well. So rating of drivers, highlighting to people about the opportunity of people who are doing a better job, because we do have issues with some carriers on gravel roads over long distances. But yeah, I mean, would be fantastic. How often do you go to call a truck and you go, oh, you see an empty truck going past the driveway? So yeah, it's definitely an awesome opportunity.
I do know there is a couple of innovators already in that space.
Yeah, there's a couple.
And so does Anna. So there's stuff on the go in that area already.
The challenge I think there though, sorry, Jace, the challenge I think is how do we make sure we support those people innovating in that space? Because we do have a tendency as an industry to sit back and watch to see if it's going to work.
Yep.
But, yeah.
Terry, yeah.
And there must have been probably an initial cost for wool trade and or AuctionsPlus wool, but what did it cost to rebuild those platforms and make them ready?
Thanks, Terry. So the AuctionsPlus wool platform we've brought it from wool trade onto the AuctionsPlus platform. We've got an in-house team of developers, but we actually did bring a contractor in to do that one, and that's cost us $70,000 to do.
Just one more, part B.
Yeah.
Do you have any issues with trust of getting people to give you their data, and why do you think you either are or are not trusted in that space?
I think, no, so we don't have any issues with people giving us their data. I think we are trusted. I think that the reason that AuctionsPlus is trusted is we believe so strongly in our values, which is customer obsession, but also doing it for either the customer or the industry. We do sell data, and that data that we sell has to go through a whole process where we understand what it's going to be used for. It's cleansed, so there's no identification of the people's data that it is. But it has to be used for either customer benefit, like indicators or better ways for them to understand what their stock's worth, or for industry benefit. So we also give a lot of data away freely to universities to understand the value of certain traits of animals and things like that. But I think trust is being able to really put your hand on your heart and say that you're going to do the right thing by your customers at the end of the day. And customer obsession is our number one value. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking if they practice what they preach, Terry, they should be able to handle that one. Lyndon first, and then we'll come down.
Up the back.
She's popular. Who's going first? Righto. Charlie DeFagley, your say.
Look out.
Yes, look out.
Shit.
Anna.
That's what he used to do when I was smoking ciggies behind the woolshed with his son as a kid.
We won't go there. I want to challenge you about linear thinking because I think you're exactly guilty of the same sin as the Sadios are. In Australia, we produce and then we sell. I'm going to challenge you. Let's sell, then produce. There you'll put trust, relationships to another level. Where are you at that with AuctionsPlus?
With AuctionsPlus, Charlie, I'd completely agree with you. So we transformed the industry back in 1986 with the new model. And I think now the challenge for us is what's next. I agree with that we should be selling before we make. And certainly the new role that I've taken on, that is exactly what we're going to be trying to do, is understanding what the customer wants and delivering to that spec, which is really, really challenging given that for everyone in this room that knows the genetics breeding side of things, that changes you make today, you're not going to see those changes for 6 years. So Charlie, I agree with you, and I think that's a challenge for AuctionsPlus moving forward, is how do we transform the way that we currently do business? Because most of the new initiatives that we're doing at the moment are automation and efficiency based. So the things that we're focusing on at the moment are how can we get stock to market quicker so that you guys can hold on to them till the last second, particularly given the current season. And so we're looking at buy now features and ways in which we can get the information up onto the site faster with minimal handling of the animals. We're looking at voice automation and things like that, which I would say definitely, Charlie, is a linear thing. And we're looking at forward contracts. So currently that's only for live animals, and Charlie, you and I have talked about, could we be talking about forward contracts for I have these ewes, I'll join them to whatever rams the buyer wants me to do, to join them to and deliver that product to them. And I think that's the way we should be going. The challenge actually isn't the technology for us though, it's the people. How do you bring people along for the ride? How do you get them on board and willing to try something new? So yeah, Charlie, I think you're spot on.
All right, we'll keep going. We've got another couple of questions here. Lou Hogan.
Oh, thanks, Anna. Just wanting to know some more about how you maintain the quality of your assessors, because that's how you maintain trust in your platform. And how do other platforms ensure that that trust is maintained? And what do you do about problems when they arise to make sure that it doesn't damage your business?
Sure. So back in 1986, the late 80s and the early 90s, the CALM accreditation process was a bit like a university degree. It was full on, and you had to be within 0.5% of any predictions, whether it be for dressing percentage, carcass weight. These guys and the guys on the ground knew how to do it, and they'd get it right. When I started at AuctionsPlus, you could get your accreditation off the back of a Weet-Bix box. A lot of the old school professionalism had shifted out of the industry, and you had a lot of younger people coming through that weren't getting the same sort of training that they got back in the late 80s and early 90s, and I think there's a gap there in our industry. My brother-in-law just went back to the family farm, and I said, hey Tim, how are you going to know what you need to do? Because there's no course you can do on how to be a farmer. And I think that education piece is a hole in our industry. But so what we do now, Lou, we have to become an accredited assessor, you do 2 days of training. You have to do 6 parallels with an endorsed assessor, so someone that we see as a professional in the industry. We don't teach them that livestock professionalism. That comes from people already in the industry, so it's almost peer reviewed. And then we monitor them for the first 6 months. They do an online exam, and it's getting better and better. We're introducing refreshers so that people every year have to do like a CPD point system to professionalise it. And with dealing with misdescriptions or issues, people need to make that claim within 48 hours of the stock arriving, and then we go through an arbitration process where there's a couple of key industry stakeholders that come in and arbitrate over the issue, depending on what it is. If it's a weight one, it might be just a tolerance and compensation gets paid. People do get rated, and people do get kicked off the system. We've kicked about 110 people off the system in the past 12 months, and that's from vendors, buyers and agents, because I think you've got to draw a line in the sand, and if you're speeding, the police are going to fine you, so we do the same.
All right. I'm going to take this one and then Kate Joseph, and I think we'll have to stop there, okay? So, one on the left.
Yep, thank
you're
you.
on my right.
A couple of questions. You just answered one that I was going to ask, is about what happens if people don't get with the system and they infringe and do things But also, how are you going to cope with security, data security? And then also, we're looking at government departments, and governments are typically reactive rather than proactive. Where we saw with the live cattle export, governments reacting to public opinion, essentially, and that's becoming a greater and greater problem. So how do we deal with data transfer, security of data, because the systems are vulnerable, and we've seen examples of government systems being hacked, maintaining data integrity.
Yep, good questions. So as I said, we've got an in-house tech team, so data security is front in mind all the time. We've already started locking down sections of the website, and we'll continue to do that. And we also require that when people are on the website, we want to know who they are, and whether they're an animal activist, whether they're from the government, whether they're whatever they're doing. And we track that because it helps us understand what people are doing. It helps us personalise the experience, but it also makes sure that we manage potential risks. So yeah, security's front in mind. There's about 10 pages in our strategy on how we manage all those potential issues, whether it be hacks, virus, things like that. And I forgot what the first question was.
Not sure. Kate Joseph, you better be quick.
Fabulous talk, thanks, Anna. Just a quick one on, you talk a lot about trust. How do you regain trust when it's lost? And there's a lot of people who've been burnt in this room, I'm sure, and the industry unfortunately has got lots of examples of it. How do you regain that trust?
It's a really great question, because it's the hardest thing to get and the easiest thing to lose. I think my experience is with authenticity and humility and coming to the table. And it can only be done face-to-face via conversations. There's people that have been burnt on AuctionsPlus before. And you know, I've made a huge effort to make sure I go and speak with those people and spend time understanding the challenges and understanding the root cause. I think you've got to admit when you're wrong. No one gets it right all the time. And you need to really be there for the right reasons. If your reasons aren't real, you won't get it. I don't know if I've answered that very well for you, Kate.
I was thinking more from the people who've been burnt as well, because you know there's a lot of people who've had issues, and you know where they've been really badly treated or been hurt, and just how they regain the trust back in the industry and be prepared to have another go.
Yep.
Talk to Kate afterwards, I reckon.
Yeah, it's a challenge. But I think, we got to wrap it up. But I think if you don't try, we might as well all go home.
All right, a big round of applause for our first speaker.
Authorised by Victorian Government, 1 Treasury Place, Melbourne.